When it comes to modern technology, minimalism is the name of the game. And the lightweight, sleek devices we use today look nothing like the clunky boxes of yesteryear. However, there is still one noticeable limitation to humanity's quest to build the most futuristic looking gadgets, possibly bezels. Those bulky frames that surround our screens and that companies seem to be tripping themselves over to get rid of. Not just for a better aesthetic, but also to cram as much screen real estate as possible into smaller and smaller packages. But whether we are talking about a phone, a monitor, or a TV, it seems like bezels are a necessary function for the time being. But to answer why, I read out an article from Sasha Kron at ASUS, manufacturer of all three product categories. Let's start with the simplest reason that we still have bezels. The edges of the modern LCD and LED displays need to be protected because they are made up of multiple layers that need to be sealed up somehow. I mean, think of trying to take a triple-decker sandwich home from a deli without wrapping it in a plastic first. But that's not the end of it. Beyond the structure and protection and support, it turns out that bezels often house equipment that drive the display itself, such as circuit and traces that run up to the screen. And if you're talking about a monitor, these components are often stored in the bottom bezel. That's why that particular one is quite usually a bit bigger. Now, it's certainly possible to put the components behind the display, but this can add a fair amount of thickness, which may impact the product's appeal to customers. But okay, hold a second. My smartphone has very thin bezels and it doesn't have a gigantic chin. Well, can't they just do whatever they are doing to the smartphones? Well, part of why smartphones get all the love is out of necessity. Phones obviously have a greater need to be portable than everyday electronics. So it makes sense that quite a bit more work has gone into eliminating bezels on phone versus the ones on your monitor or TV. And phones have the benefit of receiving extra structural support from having a logic board and the battery built in. There is also an economic reason. Profit margins on phone displays are quite a bit higher than on monitors, laptops, and TVs because the panels get produced in large batches that you can make many more phones from one batch than you can larger displays. Also, phones tend to be relatively expensive for their size, meaning that manufacturers can invest more in developing ways to reduce their bezel footprint. So, some smartphones have their screens particularly folded around the edges so that the part of the screen that needs protecting gets tucked underneath the phone's back cover, allowing further narrower bezels. In some cases, it can be clearly seen from the outside, such as with the Samsung Galaxy Edge series. Other times, panel drivers can actually be folded behind the display, something that is much more difficult to do on a gaming laptop. You see, quickly switching pixels on and off to get a higher refresh rate, fast pixel response time requires a lot of current, which means thicker wires or traces are required to carry it. Now on phones, these factors tend to not matter as much. Some manufacturers can just get away with using thin traces that are easier to fold, not so on something like a gaming laptop. So all this has meant that we look to be on the slow march towards phones with very minimal bezels, even phones that are nearly all screens such as Xiaomi's Mi Mix Alpha. But as for larger displays, well, it's certainly possible to make a very thin bezel out of a transparent material like glass, so it's less obvious. But to truly get a bezel-free display, the most promising technology right now looks like micro LED. It can get away without using bezels because the circuitry that drives LEDs is embedded in an extremely thin substrate that forms the part of a display itself. So it doesn't need the bezels either for structural support to hold the electronic components. Of course, if you really want a bezel-free display experience right this second, you could always go out and buy hold-ons as long as you don't mind looking like a total dork. So guys, hope you liked the video. If you did, hit the like button and also don't forget to subscribe.